Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. I am John Keir, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Austin Davidson. How you doing, Austin?
Doing good. How about you?
Not too bad. We are in the middle of week one of the NFL season. The Chiefs and Texans played last night on Thursday, and the Kansas City Chiefs left right off where they were last year after winning the Super Bowl. They beat the Texans pretty handily. It was a 34-20 win for the Chiefs over the Texans. Let's start there today. You know, it was really great to have football back, even though I felt like the game really wasn't all that entertaining by opener standards. The game seemed a lot more lopsided than the score might indicate.
Yeah, it was most of the Chiefs just the entire time. They never really lost. I mean, at the beginning, it looked like there was a chance because the Texans were actually the first team to go up. They were up 7-0. After that, Kansas City just scored like 31 unanswered points, and it was just like by the end, it was bad.
Yeah, so the game had a very similar script to what we saw in that playoff game last year, or I guess just a few months ago, where the Texans were able to come out with a defensive scheme and game plan that forced the Chiefs to adjust. But once they adjusted, they were still so good at what they were able to do that it didn't even matter. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire broke out with 138 rushing yards and a touchdown. A very nice run, I might add. My apologies. And, the offense was just as dynamite as ever. And like you said, 31 unanswered points after, 41 unanswered points in that playoff game last year. So, the Chiefs leaving right off. And I was not overly surprised by what we saw. The Texans really looked like a team that could have used DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah, their offense is very stagnant. And then acquiring Brandon Cooks and Randall Cobb didn't even show up until the last quarter. And he wasn't targeted until then. It's just really bad. All the guys they acquired to make a difference. And Will Fuller at least, which they didn't acquire Will Fuller. Will Fuller at least was the lone bright spot, but that was expected. After that, there was no one that really stepped up.
David Johnson doesn't really help out as much when you're down by 3 scores.
No, he doesn't.
So, as far as the way things are going for both teams, it's just one game. But the Texans are a team that the Steelers play this year, correct? Yeah.
Yes, they play week 3. There's a realistic chance that the Texans start 0-3 because the Texans play the Chiefs, just lost. They play Ravens next, and then they play the Steelers.
Well, I think it's clear that their most winnable game comes in week 3, but let's...
Literally. It's probably the Steelers are likely the easiest team they're facing in the first 3 weeks, which is it's not going to be easy.
That game's in Houston, correct?
That game, I don't know. I can't even make a guess because I don't know.
I think it is, but I'm not sure. In any case, as far as the Chiefs go, champions, big win. Let's see how they can do beyond that, because we've seen this script before.
Yeah, man, it's gonna be tough.
All right, let's turn our attention to Giants and Steelers. While everyone gets their fill of NFL games on Sunday, there will be 2 games remaining to be played on Monday. The first Monday night games of the year is always a doubleheader in week 1. The Steelers have the first act on Monday night. And they're playing the Giants, a team they last played in 2016, our first year of this podcast. For those who have been following along, the Steelers won that matchup back in December of 2016, 24-14. Just a little recap of that game since it was a little while ago. For those who might remember, Le'Veon Bell had a big game that day. He had 182 total yards. There was a safety called in the game on the Giants because of an Eric Flowers holding penalty in the end zone. Ladarius Green had his quote-unquote breakout game with the Steelers with 6 receptions for 118 yards and the clinching touchdown. So that's probably the biggest storyline you might remember from that game. Lawrence Timmons had a 58-yard interception return in the game, and the Steelers improved to 7-5, winning their third straight game after falling to 4-5 earlier in the season. They would finish 11-5. Any memories you have of that game that might have surprised you, just remembering the whole Ladarius Green experiment?
No, I don't really remember that game all too much. I remember the 2012 game a lot more, where it was like right after Hurricane Sandy in New York. I don't that game is more memorable to me than the 2016 game.
What's interesting is it'll be similar this time from a standpoint of coming out after, not that the disaster is similar, but Hurricane Sandy the epicenter was in New York City, and that's where the pandemic, the coronavirus's original epicenter in the United States was in New York City. There's not going to be any fans in the stands, so it'll be kind of an eerily similar feeling where a major event happened in the city, and now the Steelers will be playing the Giants.
Yeah, man, it is pretty similar.
So let's turn our attention to the injury reports, starting with the Steelers. It's pretty simple. David DeCastro and Deontay Johnson were the two players for the Steelers who have been on the injury report the last 2 days. DeCastro and Johnson, with a knee and foot injury respectively, didn't practice on Thursday. DeCastro still did not practice on Friday. I don't think he's expected to play, and Deontay Johnson was a full participant on Friday, so it looks like Johnson should be okay, but I don't think DeCastro is expected to play, which, would be not a devastating loss, but not one that you really want for the first game of the year.
Yeah, no, it's unideal. It felt like DeCastro was going to be ready since the 53-man rosters were revealed when J.C. Hassenauer made it. That kind of told me, it's like, oh, okay, we're probably starting Wisniewski the first game, which means we need a backup center guard type behind Wisniewski. So that's good. And the Deontay Johnson thing, I literally called exactly what was happening. I sent on Twitter, John, when I saw that, I was like, he's literally being held out, and I guarantee you he's going to be full practice on Friday because the Steelers didn't protect a wide receiver. If the Steelers really thought Deontay Johnson was going to be down or was at risk of being down, they would have protected Deion Kane or Darbo on the practice squad. So it worked out exactly how I thought it was, where they were just being cautious with Johnson, keeping him out one day, and they brought him back to full the next.
By all accounts, the injury to DeCastro is nothing too serious by the fact that he did not go on injured reserve. I've also heard beat writers and reporters saying that they think that the Steelers are just holding him out a little bit extra longer because they just want him to return to full strength because they're worried that if he comes back too soon, it would be a nagging issue.
That makes sense. I mean, you don't want something to last throughout the season, possibly make it worse.
Speaking of nagging injuries, let's turn our attention to the Giants. They have several players with hamstring injuries. Those can be injuries that fit the description of what might be considered nagging. Tate Crowder, Golden Tate, and Levine Toiolo, I believe is how you say that name, for the Giants, all have been limited the last 2 days in practice. Marcus Golden and Adrian Colbert were limited or didn't practice on Thursday and practiced in full on Friday. So that's the Giants side of things. It doesn't look like they'll have anyone that necessarily won't be able to go. So it looks like the Giants and Steelers are at relatively full strength, which you might expect coming off the preseason that didn't have any games, just training camp.
Yeah, it makes sense. There shouldn't be that many injuries.
So the first thing to talk about when it comes to this game is the return of Ben Roethlisberger for obvious reasons. Having not played in almost a full calendar year, the last time he threw an NFL pass, he injured his elbow and was forced to miss the rest of the season with major elbow surgery. By all accounts, he threw the ball great in training camp, but that's just training camp. He had a lot of chance to rest in the offseason, no OTAs, no preseason to speak of, so he said he's pretty nervous, kind of jittery getting into this first game. So I guess how do we think that he's going to look this year? It's easy to say, well, maybe he won't play well because he's coming off the injury. Maybe he'll be better. What do you think?
I feel good for the year. for this game specifically, like, I just have this weird, it's either going to be like a 500-yard game where he comes back and is like, wow, this is, nothing happened, he didn't skip a beat, or it's going to be like awful. The first game is going to be bad, and people are like, well, he's done, and like that's not going to right, like just immediately saying like it's done because it came out to a slow start. I don't know which one it's going to be exactly yet, but that's how it feels in my head. It's like he's either going to come out and pass for 400 yards or not do well at all. So I am excited to see what he can do. He doesn't have the hardest challenge with the Giants' defense, not in the slightest. Their cornerbacks aren't very good. Their safeties, like they were hoping for Xavier McKinney to come on and start, and he is now on IR. So that leaves Jabril Peppers kind of alone back there. I guess Logan Ryan. I'm sorry. I keep thinking of Logan Ryan as a cornerback, but he's still new to the team, so he might not even be starting anyway. But he is going to be playing safety for them at least a little bit. That's the position he's listed at. Just as a whole, Ben should have he's having an easier time. He could have started against a way harder defense.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of things to like about this particular matchup. I feel good about his season, but I actually kind of feel differently as far as this game goes. I think he will have not necessarily a pedestrian game, but kind of a quiet game. I don't think he's going to be throwing the ball a ton. I have a funny feeling the Steelers are going to be leaning heavily on James Conner in this game. Not in terms of he's going to have 30 carries and the ground game is going to run the ball a ton, but I think that we might see a little bit heavier of a dose of the ground game in this particular game than we did the last time Ben Roethlisberger was slinging the ball back in 2018. And I don't know if that's necessarily the right thing to do. I think if Roethlisberger can play and can throw, I think the idea is you do what's best for the team, what's most efficient. And I'm not sure that running the ball is the right choice, but I don't know. I'm a little concerned about the Steelers' offensive line, and I guess we'll get to that. But as far as Roethlisberger is concerned, I'm not overly concerned. I know that he struggled a bit in terms of PFF grading in his last full year of 2018, but I tend to be one of the people that buys in more to the idea that he could be even better than he was the last time we saw him in a full season. The thing you have to understand about these elbow injuries, we see it a lot in baseball, is that when they have these major Tommy John type surgeries, it wasn't exactly Tommy John that he had, but usually when they come back, these pitchers and MLB players, when they come back, their arm is better than it was before. So I think there's a possibility that he could have some more arm strength and accuracy, some issues that he might have had with placing balls in the past. I have a feeling he'll be a little bit better with this season, at least early on. I mean, we don't know how much wear and tear he might put into it this year, but I think that he has the potential to have a really good game this week, but not one that's so good that we're all talking about it next week, other than just, he played well. But obviously he's the catalyst.
Yeah, this is going to run through him how well the Steelers as a team really do this year. And, I mean, building on what you said about the things are going to be better for him, and in the 3-part series that Ben Roethlisberger made, which was really nice, by the way, I encourage everyone to go check that out because you get a look into Ben Roethlisberger's life, who's typically not very open with the media and stuff. We don't really know much about him. He said that in there, it's like the first time that he's not had pain in that elbow in 14 or 15 years, which is ridiculous. Like, he's been playing, because these things were already partially torn. It was just the fact that It's the fact that he was able to play through it regardless, because they weren't that bad. He was just playing through the pain. It was just like, after a few throws it would hurt a little, just keep going. And obviously he did that for 14 years. And it was just it's just really good to hear that for the first time in 14, 15 years, it doesn't hurt. It just means that he can improve on what he's done in years past. If he's been playing through pain, like it's just now it's like he could be even better. Which I'm not going to say that. And the series, by the way, is called Bigger Than Ben. You can look it up on YouTube. And there's 3 parts at the moment. I believe that's all they're doing. But I don't know. They might be going one more part. It might be 4 parts. Yeah, the series is called Bigger Than Ben. He's been posting it on his personal Twitter page that's not run by him. Yeah.
Bigger Than Ben, they should make sure that there's a part on it that says by Ben. Because it is made by him, like his company, correct? His video production
They
team?
outsourced it to someone. I don't know who
Steelers
actually outsourced it to, because yeah, a rep one football. I don't think that's his crew. That's who
Gotcha.
posted on YouTube.
I understand. Oh, I'm seeing on YouTube it's Rep 1 Football. I don't know if that's who it was directly associated with, but in any case, I have not looked at that. I will have to check that out at some point. Do you buy into the idea that he shouldn't throw the ball, what was it, 600 like 70 times last year?
No, I don't. I don't buy into that. He should throw as much as possible, as much as he wants to throw.
The only reason I say I don't want him to throw quite as much is just because I think if he's not throwing as much, the Steelers are running the ball because they're ahead late in games, if that makes sense.
Okay, that's fair.
But that's it.
I feel like it's never been the Steelers' style.
Well, not recently anyway.
Not recently. I'm sorry. Yeah, let me correct that. Not since 2013.
But what I guess what I meant more so is, I keep hearing about like you don't want him throwing the ball that many times because I guess the idea is that he's whipping it, 20 yards downfield, just throwing it as hard as he can every time he throws the ball. That's just not true. I mean, the last couple years, 2017, 2018, we saw more than ever. He was throwing passes just a couple yards down the field, just, even behind the line of scrimmage. He wasn't necessarily throwing the ball, way down the field. So I don't buy into this notion that just because he's throwing it less doesn't mean he's putting as much strain on. I mean, he could throw it less, but could be throwing it deep more often.
You know the route that he actually said is the worst? It's the out routes. Out routes are the routes we have to worry about because Ben pointed going back to that series, the Bigger Than Ben series, throw that he talks about that he has to put the most power on are out routes. So those are going to be the ones that are probably going to be limited.
Yeah, people think when they're watching that, arm strength is just about heaving the ball 50 plus yards down the field, and that is a part of it. But the other thing you have to consider is getting the ball out on the boundaries because a lot of times those are passes that are easier to pick off if you can't rifle it in there. And because the ball has to travel a lot of ground, and it's easier because the defensive player can cut it off. So, I mean, there's a lot to consider there, and that's where you really need that arm strength. But I don't buy into that. Just like I don't. The other thing to think about is if he is finally healthy and that elbow's better now than it ever has been, why not let him rip?
Exactly. He's feeling good. Just go with however Ben's feeling. If he says his elbow's starting to hurt, you take it easy.
The one thing I would like to think, though, is that, we'll kind of transition to another issue here, is that the offensive line is, I wouldn't say that they're in bad shape, but there's a lot of shuffling along the offensive line that's been relatively stable for a long time now. And even though this Giants defensive front isn't super fearsome, I'd like to think that Roethlisberger should still be trying to get the ball out quickly, like he typically has over the course of the last 5+ years, just because he's in better shape now and he hasn't taken any hits. But now more than ever, you want to make sure that you're getting the ball out with a lot of changes along the offensive line, at least for this week.
This is a good test for Sean Sarrett this week to see how well he could work with a not perfect offensive line. Being down David DeCastro is tough, and I don't know if we said it, but in the last podcast, the Steelers depth chart listed Zach Banner and Chukwuma Okorafor as co-starters. It is now official that Zach Banner is going to be starting there. So starting with a new right tackle than he did last season, moving Matt Filer in, and now having to start Wisniewski, it's a big test for how Sean Sarrett has prepared his guys because it's always next man up mentality. And this is a big game. This is Ben's first game back. You don't want him to be hit more than – you just don't want him to be hit, period, in any game. But it's just it's going to be a big test for him.
A lot of issues. We saw the last time that there was a delay in the NFL's preseason program back in 2011 with the lockout. We saw that defenses around the NFL had a bit of a jump on offenses in the league for about the first couple months. And it took a little while for opposing offenses to finally get things going. One aspect of that was offensive lines. You know that playing together in chemistry is a big part of an offensive line's success, and the Steelers have had that for a long time. This will be the first time, assuming DeCastro doesn't play, that neither Ramon Foster nor David DeCastro have been in the Steelers lineup since I think like 2012, 2013, which you just don't see. So the fact that there's a lot of changes and you had a shortened preseason without any games to work on something like that is a little concerning. I mean, there's question marks at every offensive line position. Just going left to right, Alejandro Villanueva is probably the most steady in terms of he's coming back. He doesn't have anything going on, but he might already be in decline. There were reports from camp that he was the third best offensive tackle in camp, and that Chukwuma Okorafor is also taking snaps at left tackle. So his job might not necessarily be safe. So that's pretty concerning. And we know the last couple of years he's been a slow starter. He tends to give up bad pressures early on in the year. So that's not something you want to hear. And Filer's at a new position at left guard. He's played well at guard in the preseason, but we've never seen it in the regular season for extended time. Marquise Pouncey, he has a meniscus tear in his knee that he's choosing to play through. I wish I knew more details about it because I would think it makes more sense for him to play through it, but he's not, or to get surgery, but instead he's playing through it. That's something to be concerned about. Wisniewski, the new coming starter at right guard, is a question mark, and then obviously Banner at right tackle is a question mark too. You know, again, this Giants front seven isn't all that threatening, but at the same time, there's a lot of turnover here, so I want to see Roethlisberger getting the ball out quickly on Monday night.
Yeah, getting the ball out quickly is ideal. The one thing that I think the offensive line got going for them is the cliche that people live by is iron sharpens iron. And going against T.J. Watt, against Bud Dupree, against Cameron Hayward, against Stephon Tuitt in camp is going to help you. It's going to give you – you're going to practice against, like, the best possible people you can. And if they can do well against T.J. Watt, Cameron Hayward, and Bud Dupree, which Bud Dupree brings a separate skill set of a speed rusher that can just get around you. If they can perform against all those three, I think you're good. And then two, it's just kind of like the same as Hayward, just not as good. So, and that's not saying two, it isn't good, but I think that it's good that they got to verse such good pass rushers in the camp. But even if they look bad, it's not the worst to look bad against one of the best defenses in the league.
Let's move to another part of the offense. These three guys, James Conner, Vance McDonald, and Juju Smith-Schuster, all struggled for different reasons in 2019. Smith-Schuster and Conner had a lot of injuries, and McDonald, while he was dealing with stuff too, he did play most of the season and was just kind of invisible. These three guys have different roles in the offense, but these are all guys that need to produce on at least some level for the Steelers to have success this year. Can they kind of get back on the right page this week?
I think it's possible, especially for Smith-Schuster. What I'm looking for is a connection. And while I love Deontay Johnson, I don't think him and Ben have really had enough time to form a connection. I mean, they've had training camp and they had like the first 2 weeks of the season last season, but it just wasn't enough. What we did see, though, prior to that is Ben and Smith-Schuster had a connection, so that could be revived. I'm looking for a bounce back from him. McDonald also could, but I'm not as high on McDonald. And Connor's good. I still hold that. It's just he needs to have a full season where he doesn't get injured. That's his biggest problem. Connor could bounce back. You just got to not get injured, but like you can't really account for that. Like you can't. Like obviously players don't want to get injured. It just if Connor can stay healthy, he's going to bounce back. The only one that I'm most unsure of is McDonald. The way I'm trying to hold back excitement because it literally reminds me of last year. The way they talked about Eric Ebron in camp has been incredible. There has been talks of drops. There's been talks of really good connection. Ben Roethlisberger wanted him on the team because they were part of the same religious group, like for NFL players, stuff like that. Ebron could take over. They're currently listed as co-stars, but I'm just not sure how McDonald's going to perform. What do you think about those people bouncing back?
I'm gonna kind of work backwards here and start with McDonald. And I think that the best we've seen of McDonald has occurred when he's not the guy, when he's kind of part of a 1A, 1B situation. We saw that with Jesse James, 2-3 years ago, that he was at his best when he didn't have to be the guy playing all the tight end snaps.
I think that's fair, yeah. So it might be
Less is more.
Him to have Ebron playing next to him.
Less is more with him, and we can get legitimate 2 tight end sets now. There's no need to use that extra offensive lineman, which I mean they will still use, but it's not like they're only using it out of necessity. They will have another good tight end in the lineup. They say Ebron's become a better blocker. I guess he has to be better if you're going to be a tight end on the Steelers, but I still don't think he's going to be that good at it. That being said, I really want to see McDonald be a guy that they use in the red zone. We're going to talk about Chase Claypool in a minute here, but Ebron was one of the guys that was added to be a weapon in the red zone. Let's not forget that McDonald is also 6'4", so that gives the Steelers 3 legitimate tall weapons that Ben Roethlisberger likes to have near the red zone. And McDonald's never been a guy that puts up, he's never going to be a guy that has a 13 touchdown season like Ebron had, but he could still chip in 5+, I think, in the red zone. I still think that that's really nice to have because it keeps defenders guessing.
It is nice. It is nice to have so many red zone threats that could. It makes the offense vary. And what we've heard from camp is that the offense is actually trying to do some motioning, some disguising, and some other stuff. So, along with having some more red zone red zone targets this season, I think that Steelers are in good position to have a bounce back year on offense in total.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that actually. So you mentioned all the motion. That's no doubt the Matt Canada effect. More pre-snap movement. I don't know if we're necessarily going to see the Kansas City Chiefs pre-snap movement that they like to have, but I think that we're going to see a lot more of that this year, and I think that that's something that's really good because there's 2 things that generally work in the NFL that teams should do more often and don't for some reason, the Steelers being one of them. Number one, this was a huge criticism I had for years now, is that they don't use enough play action. Ben Roethlisberger is one of the better quarterbacks in the league over his career off of play action, but he's consistently over the last 5+ years has used it less than pretty much any other starting quarterback, and it just confuses me because he's so good at it. But he just doesn't like to do it. I guess he doesn't like turning his back to the defense.
Yeah, they must be worried about him getting hurt with all the injuries because obviously you have to have time. But, I mean, the offensive line has been good all this time, so I don't really know why they don't do it more either.
I just think it's a personal preference thing with the quarterback.
So.
And then the motion was another thing because pre-snap motion helps to identify coverages, so I'm looking forward to seeing all that. But back to the original point, this time about Connor. Yeah, you're right, Austin. I actually think that between Connor McDonald and Smith-Schuster, that Connor, when healthy, is actually the best player in terms of his position rank. I think Connor, when healthy, is actually a top 10 running back. The problem is he just is almost never healthy. Even his breakout year of 2018. Remember that stretch of 4 or 5 weeks where he had I think it was 88 rushing yards every week or something like that. He was really, really good and he was running effectively. He can make people miss. He's not the fastest player in the league, but he can make guys miss and he has considerable power. And he's a much better receiver now than he was when he was coming out. He can do it. It's just he's never put together that fully healthy season, not since he was a sophomore in college.
Yeah, it's just tough. Because, again, like you said, he's a very talented player, and he could be a top 10 running back when he's healthy. It just doesn't stay healthy. It's always something, always a little bit of a hamstring, always this, always that. So it's just on him to try and stay healthy this year, which is kind of a tough ask.
I'm curious to see where Smith-Schuster lines up this year, kind of how he's going to play, because I think, there's a lot of people that are down on him this year, and I understand their skepticism because Deontay Johnson performed and he didn't last year with the bad quarterbacks. But that being said, when you're getting pressed at the line and being doubled like Smith-Schuster was, he's not the type of route runner that Deontay Johnson is. Deontay Johnson is a guy that's meant to get open all the time. Smith-Schuster's not that type of receiver. He's a different type of player. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I just think it lended Deontay Johnson to have more success last year because of the way defenses were playing them. Now, that being said, when there's a guy that Ben Roethlisberger needs to get the ball to, who's he going to trust more than anyone? It's going to be Smith-Schuster, at least early on. So I think he's going to have a solid bounce back year. I think he could have, maybe around 80 plus catches. I don't know if he's ever going to have the 111 catches he had a couple of years ago. I don't think he'll get there, but I think he's going to have a very solid year, and I think he'll bounce back in a big way.
Yeah, man. That was something I was hoping for in the offseason. I was hoping that he would switch back to the slot position, which is what he played when Antonio Brown was with the team, because he was so effective out of the slot and could have been part of the reason why he wasn't as good last year, other than the shaky quarterback play. But I was hoping he would move into the slot, let Deontay Johnson play the X, and have James Washington stay in the Z, and that would help him go back to his previous years of production. Again, not like 111 catches like he did, but I think it would help him because it was his natural position to play as a big slot wide receiver.
All right, let's move on to Chase Claypool real quick. Oftentimes rookies generate big buzz through training camp. When there's nothing to talk about, it's easy to understand why Claypool might have made headlines, but by all accounts, the hype is real. Are you buying into it?
I'm buying into it. The Steelers know how to draft wide receivers. I believe them. They could tell me that the wide receiver anyone else in the league could tell me the wide receiver that Steelers drafted is trash, and I'm going to say that they're probably better than any wide receiver on their team because the Steelers it's their best position. Granted, they have made mistakes, like Sammy Coates, but Marcus Wheaton. Well, I still think Marcus Wheaton was okay for what he did.
How about Limas Swede then?
Okay, Limas Swede was a huge mistake, but for every mistake, they've got the Santonio Holmes and Antonio Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster in the second round. Deontay Johnson looked great in his first year in the third, and Chase Claypool, so far so good. Training camps. He is one of the most talked about receivers I've seen in a while, like rookie wide receivers. Like Deontay Johnson didn't get this hype in camp last year. He actually might have been hurt. Wasn't he hurt last year?
He was hurt.
Into camp?
He was hurt, and so that's the thing is, like, he did work a little with Ben, but the thing is he was a backup earlier in the year, and by the time he was healthy and he was playing, Roethlisberger was out for the year. So we really haven't seen a lot of Johnson and Ben, which makes what Johnson did last year all the more impressive.
Yeah. So overall, it's just Chase Claypool has just been very hyped up. He's gotten high praise from everyone on the team, so I believe it. I don't think he's going to start early on, but I think we're going to see him in the offense earlier than expected. Like he's going to get like a lot more snaps by week 5.
Red zone. Look for him in the red zone.
Yes, sir. His specialty.
I just saw Chris Sims. I can't remember where it was on, but he was he's a Notre Dame guy, so I guess it makes sense that he's going to say this, but he's a big believer in Chase Claypool, and he thinks that the Steelers' past history in taking receivers and Claypool's raw athletic ability is going to be big, and I think that, again, he's going to be a guy that plays early. I don't know if he's going to play 50 snaps a game, but I think you might see him on the field for maybe 30. This is a guy that has potential, and I think the Steelers aren't going to be afraid to use it this year. On the other side of the ball, this was the league's best defense when it came to splash plays last season. They've finished with 50-plus sacks each of the last 3 years, but the turnovers finally came around this year. 38 takeaways this past year, and they still finished relatively well in terms of overall statistical dominance. Where is the weakness here?
The only weakness that I see is still going to be at strong safety. It's just going to be Terrell Edmunds, and it's not necessarily a weakness. I think Edmunds could step up this year, but it's the only spot from last year that I'm like, wow, he doesn't I don't believe in them because even Tyson Alualu, I don't think the Steelers are going to play with like a traditional nose tackle, even though he's listed as it. The Steelers offset their line and the way they play their linemen, they kind of shift them around. So I like Alualu being a starter. He's been very consistent. It's just Terrell Edmonds that I'm worried about. If he could take that step, though, there is no weakness. If that's all, if Terrell Edmonds could get a set of hands or be in position to get the ball, regardless, force some turnovers, this defense is one of the best defenses, not only in the NFL, but like this could be a generational defense with how good it is everywhere.
Let's I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. What? No, I'm still blanking, man. I'm out of it.
It happens, dog.
Oh, you know what? I remember now. I wouldn't call it a weakness per se, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, but the Steelers at times at the end of last season were susceptible to the run, and I don't think the running game is really that overly important in the NFL anymore. But it is something you have to kind of watch out for. If there is something that the Steelers defense struggled with last year, and I wouldn't even say they struggled with it, they just had a couple bad games at the end of the year, it was run defense. So, I mean, is that a really big deal? Are they that bad at it?
I personally don't think so. I think this defense is set.
I
well.
actually think Vince Williams would help in that regard as opposed to Mark Barron. So, I mean, I don't know if they're that much. I mean, they're worse because they don't have Javon Hargrave, and he's much better at that than Tyson Alualu. But that's not because Alualu is a bad player. He's just not. He's not a natural nose, and he's not as talented. But I don't think it's going. I don't think we're gonna see guys running for 100 yards on the Steelers week in and week out. But I also don't think we're gonna see a stretch of like 2.5, 3 years between the Steelers allowing a 100-yard rusher.
I think that's fair. They might not be able to stop every rusher, but defense is definitely good enough to not have it happen every game.
Well, let's focus on the Steelers' best players. At every level of their defense, they have a star player who's one of the top 5 best at their position in the league, if not higher. Cameron Hayward just recently rewarded with a contract extension. He's still playing like one of the best defensive linemen in football. In fact, may have put up arguably his best season last year. Going up against the Giants, their offensive line, it added some new pieces, but you look at who they have overall. On the interior, they have Will Hernandez, Kevin Zeitler, and Nick Gates. I've never heard of Gates. Hernandez is a guy that was was he a first-round pick?
Hernandez, no, early second.
That's right. He was an early second. He's been around a handful of years. He's never been anything special as far as I remember, though.
Yeah, he's done decently, but I mean their offensive line still isn't that good.
No, and then Kevin Zeitler, the longtime Cleveland Browns player, came over. He was always solid, but I never thought crazy highly of him. So that Giants interior offensive line can be had
easily. The entire line that they have can be really had. I mean, they're starting a rookie tackle on one side. I thought they were going to be starting a rookie tackle on the second, but Cameron Fleming was able to win the job over Matthew Pert from Connecticut, one of John's prospects in the pre-draft process. But regardless, it's just their offensive line can be exposed, and just if you're one of the Steelers pass rushers in this game, you got to be excited. You got to be getting ready, especially. Couple this along with Daniel Jones had the most fumbles of any quarterback last year, and it makes you excited to be a pass rusher in this game.
Yeah, so another thing to consider, as a matter of fact, Stephon Tuitt actually had a higher pressure percentage than Cameron Hayward did last year, or pass rushing win percentage, if that makes any sense.
People don't think about him, and it's crazy. Now, Cameron Hayward for a while was very underrated, and now Tuitt's likely to go underrated because he got injured last year. But I've said this a few times on the podcast, but even with how good T.J. Watt was playing, Tuitt, before he got hurt, was arguably the Steelers' best defensive player, which was wild because they were just him and Watt were just going absolutely nuts together. They're both doing it, and so with him back, like people just forget about him or don't even think about him as much of a great defensive player, and it's kind of crazy. That's why I don't feel that's bad about losing Javon Hargrave, because we might have lost Javon Hargrave, but we get Stephon Tuitt back, which is like kind of like, I know it's a separate position on the line, but it's just like now you have another better player there, you know?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it almost is like that because the base 3-4 is not on the field very much, so it's kind of like you're replacing Hargrave with Tuitt, which is, an upgrade. Not to slight Hargrave, who I still think is one of the better interior offensive linemen. It's just that Tuitt, it's like I've said this for most of his career. I always felt like Tuitt's upside was even higher than that of Cameron Hayward, whether it was injuries or just inconsistent play. He's never been able to put it together for more than sometimes a few games at a time. But when he's on, I really feel like he's the best defensive lineman on this team when he is on, which again has not always been the case.
I could totally see it. Like I said, last year he was playing out of his mind at the beginning of the year.
So let's continue to move on to T.J. Watt, a guy who finished as a finalist for the Defensive Player of the Year award. How much better can he really get? Because his yearly growth from solid starter as a rookie to top tier pass rusher year 2 to elite defensive playmaker year 3. I mean, he's right up there in terms of players getting sacks over the course of his young career. He's right up there. How much better can he really get?
I feel like he hasn't topped out, but he's pretty close to his peak. I mean, 13 and a half sacks, that seems like what he can do. Like, this upcoming year. Like, that's how he could do as a whole. There's no reason I'll think that he's slowing down, other than if they decide they want to drop him back into coverage again, like in his first year. If they want to do that more. And sure, that's led him to more interceptions in his career than a normal pass rusher. But, I think there's no limit for T.J. Watt exactly. But I think 13 and a half sacks is more than attainable for him.
Will he win Defensive Player of the Year this year?
It's so tough. I want to say yes. But I still feel like he got snubbed last year. I feel like Gilmore was just the safe pick because their team was
They
positive.
made the playoffs, yeah.
And they made the playoffs. So I think if Steelers made it, I think Watt would have had it.
Well, he's playing Cameron Fleming, who, I mean, I never thought he was all that impressive personally.
Oh no, Cameron Fleming's no good. That's why I thought Matthew Pert would win it. I just assumed that Cameron Fleming
rookies
was going to be there for depth.
It's those rookies, I mean, besides that, the Broncos is what's his name? Tunsil. Is he a left tackle or a right tackle?
Jeremy Tunsil's a left tackle.
So he wouldn't see Watt. I don't know who's the right tackle in Denver this year. Did they draft somebody? I can't remember.
They had DeJuan James, but he opted out. So it should be Garrett Bowles still?
No,
wait, was Garrett Bowles their left tackle? Garrett Bowles might be their left tackle.
Well,
I don't remember.
The Titans, Jack Conklin is gone. The Eagles have had a whole rash of injuries already. They haven't even played. The Browns have 2 right tackles on their team. To one of them has to play left tackle, so we'll see how that goes. The Ravens have good tackles. I think it's conceivable that Watt has a huge year and could win the Defensive Player of the Year.
Easily, dude. If he just performs like he did last year and this team makes the playoffs, it's almost guaranteed. That's it. If they made the playoffs, he was winning it.
Two more things. Minkah Fitzpatrick and Devin Bush, their growth from year 1 to year 2 in the Steelers system. I think both of them could be even better, and what do you expect to see from them?
I think Devin Bush stat-wise is definitely going to be better. I mean, he put up some great stats last year, but without Mark Barron rotating in, now he's competing with Marcus Allen, question mark, because I don't actually know. They said they're going to use Marcus Allen as a hybrid, but he's still listed as a safety, so don't really know. But it's him, and then he's going to be competing with Ulysses Gilbert III. So, I mean, I think that Devin Bush is going to play a lot more percentage-wise of snaps than he did last year. And it should lead to him having more output. And I hope that in this year, step forward, he becomes even better as a tackler. That seems like it was like the part weakness of his game where like the same with like Ryan Shazier. When Ryan Shazier was playing, his weakness was always tackling. The playmaking was great, but it just wasn't that great as a tackler. I hope Devin Bush steps up in that regard. But I still don't have a problem because Devin Bush was great last year. So I hope for good things for him. And Minka Fitzpatrick, I trust 100%. I don't think Minka Fitzpatrick has to do anything differently than he did in this previous year. He was basically as close to perfect as you could ask.
So as far as Bush goes, I think this is going to be a huge season for him. I think this year we're going to see why he was drafted number 10 overall. I think his growth as a player from solid starter in year 1 to potential superstar in year 2 is going to be huge for this defense. And he struggled a little bit in man coverage last year because we saw that was something he was raw at coming out of Michigan. By all accounts, he's doing much better with it this year. I'm going to be really excited to see how he plays in Fitzpatrick. Year 2 in the defense, I really like it. How do you view the opinion that he's going to be used and moved around a little bit? I've thought about it a lot. I'm okay with him moving around and doing different things from time to time. I don't think I want it to be done a ton for 2 reasons. Number 1 is he took away the deep third of the field last year. That's not a bad thing to take away. You don't want to be trusting that to anyone other than him if you don't have to. Number 2, if you are moving him around, that means you're moving someone else around, like Terrell Edmunds. Do you trust Terrell Edmunds to cover him when Minka Fitzpatrick is moving around, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it's definitely a tough choice. I personally prefer leaving Minka where he's comfortable. Because I view it this way. If you're going to have a guy play at 100% in one spot, why are you going to move him to other spots where he's going to play maybe 95, 90%, which is nice. It's still good. You're still getting 90%. But, like, you could keep him at his best possible play if you keep him in his spot. It's also the reason why he wanted to leave Miami, partially. It was moving around. So I wouldn't want to really move him around all too much. I like him where he's at.
I'd consider doing it a little, and I'd see what the sample size says. Does it say getting him around the ball more gets more turnovers, or does it say maybe moving him out of there allows other teams to take more shots down the field, so maybe we shouldn't do that. That's going to be my determining factor on that.
Yeah, we'll have to take a wait-and-see approach.
As far as the Giants go, there's a few things to talk about. Not a very quality team this past season, but they're a team in transition. They got their quarterback of the future last year in Daniel Jones. Now they have their coach of the future in Joe Judge. Your quick opinion on both guys?
Daniel Jones has just got to fix those turnovers, man. Between the interceptions and fumbles, that was tough. Like, he's not a bad player all in all. Just the turnovers are so tough, which are making him like a not so good player. If he could fix those, I'll think more highly of him. The moment Daniel Jones is just like meh, just he exists, he's there. Joe Judge, I think, is going to be quick out in New York. The reports from training camp are bad. He doesn't sound like a player's coach at all. Sounds really rough, and like he's already had to have players defend him. I think he's going to be out quick. I'm not a big fan of Joe Judge.
He did do something interesting where he taped tennis balls to the hands of defensive backs to keep them from holding in drills and practice, which might sound ridiculous, but I actually think that's kind of interesting.
It's interesting. He's also made them run laps like they're in high school, and then made them restart practice yesterday, like literally because he didn't like how they were practicing. So, no.
I'm not as big a fan as that, but the tennis ball things, they should do that during the game.
Make it easier, no penalties.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm not big on Judge, but Jones is interesting because he was pressured a lot last year, wasn't he?
He was pressured a huge amount. Okay. That's part of the turnovers, but their line didn't really get better.
According to PFF, he was a league average quarterback when pressured last year, but they're more kind of stable metric for grading quarterbacks is how you perform when you're given a clean pocket. In terms of passer rating, Daniel Jones finished 24th out of the top 32 quarterbacks and dropbacks there. He threw 8 interceptions from a clean pocket last year, which was tied for the 8th most. So take that for what you will. But I think that he's going to mature into a solid quarterback. But I think that with a young team, a young coach and quarterback, a year of transition, I think that this is a big time weakness for the Giants and a huge advantage for the Steelers because they haven't had time to work on anything.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for Daniel Jones coming in and playing the Steelers defense that last year was really good at forcing turnovers, and he was really bad at causing turnovers. So it's going to be fun.
So their best thing to do is to lean on Saquon Barkley. That's their main offense. I mean, they still have Sterling Shepard there. They who else they have? They have Golden Tate there. They have some players. Darius Slayton, a guy that you liked coming out last year, 2 years ago. They have some pieces, but we know that the offense is going to live through Saquon Barkley. So he's going to have to go off for them to win. What's it going to take?
I think it's going to take like 130 yards from Saquon at least, and likely at least one touchdown to go with those 130 yards. Basically, Clyde Edwards-Helaire's performance just for Saquon Barkley. I think that's what it's going to take for them to win, if not more, because it's going to be tough. I really don't. Looking at this game, I can't see Daniel Jones passing effectively against the Steelers defense. Just way too much pressure, way too much good coverage from the cornerbacks and Minkah Fitzpatrick. It's just going to be way too tough for him to pass.
Is Saquon Barkley the best running back in the league?
No. No, that definitely belongs to Christian McCaffrey at the moment.
Is Barkley too?
By far. He could be. It's between him and Zeke. I like to put Saquon Barkley ahead of Zeke because Saquon Barkley's had to do it behind a bad offensive line, and he still came out looking really good. Zeke also looks good, but he's been behind a elite offensive line his entire career. So that always puts the edge to Saquon Barkley for me.
That's true, and you made the right choice because Zeke is not nearly as efficient as a player as Barkley is, just saying.
Yeah, that's that too. I'm not as big on Zeke as a lot of other people are. I don't think Zeke is my third. Nick Chubb is my third. I love Nick Chubb.
No, based on everything I've seen, a lot of Zeke, and actually Chubb is kind of guilty of this too last year, is not nearly as much though, is that a lot of his stats are volume based. He just has, Zeke breaks the most tackles. Zeke, has the most yards, but he also carries the ball more than anyone else. He's playing more games than anyone else, which is important. It's not that he's not effective. It's just that he's not the most efficient player. So I don't think he's the most talented and best. He's solid, but he's not the best.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Anything else about the Giants you wanted to throw out there?
No, not really. I think that we're good, other than I just wanted to agree that I love Darius Slayton. Darius Slayton finished with 8 touchdowns last year because he's freaking great. And he only started playing halfway through the year. Oh. He is awesome. I love Darius Slayton.
So bottom line, this is a team where the Steelers were probably already better than in most aspects, but you factor in the return of Ben Roethlisberger and you factor in the post-COVID world we're living in where there's no OTAs. The Steelers are a lot more stable. A team with the same head coach for a long time, the same quarterback for a long time, as compared to a team that has only a quarterback in his second year and a brand new coach. I think that just gives the Steelers an even bigger advantage.
Yeah, it should help. I mean, the Giants have had a lot to learn this offseason, and it didn't go their way. Like I said, they lost Xavier McKinney, who they were figuring was getting a starting role. They lost DeAndre Baker, who they figured was getting a starting role. It's just tough.
All right, let's transition. There's one bit of Steelers news to get to today. The other day, Ryan Shazier officially announced his retirement from the NFL earlier this week. not too surprising when you saw he went on the reserve retired list last month, but sad to see, but definitely understandable.
Yeah, it just wasn't safe for him to ever make a return to football, and I'm sure his body just wasn't allowing it anyway. But it was glad. I'm glad he got to stick around for as long as he did. I'm glad that he was part of the Steelers. I just wish the best for him going forward. I think he's going to be doing Twitch streams a lot, so that's kind of cool.
I'm not sure that he will be away forever. I know that he's got some aspirations of being a coach, and I mean, the way he, handled, mentoring Devin Bush in his first year, I think he could have a future with that.
It's definitely possible. For now, he wants to step away from football. It sounded like from what he said.
First bit of NFL news to get to. I'm just checking NFL.com. Brandon McManus.
Let's start with Von Miller, man.
Oh yeah,
Von Miller's probably the biggest news you can get.
Yeah, that's a good point. So
yes,
Zach Banner, his job just got a little bit easier a couple weeks from now with Von Miller, the Denver Broncos edge rusher, probably a future Hall of Famer, former Super Bowl MVP, having a freak. What was it? An ankle? Freak broken ankle just exploded out of nowhere on the last practice play.
Yeah, that was a shame. His ankle, and he's the best case scenario is he's out 3 months, meaning he can return if the Broncos are doing well. But that's literally best case scenario. It's likely it's going to take 6 months to recover from. And Miller's age, this is awful. And it was like you said, the last play of practice, and then continuing forward, the Broncos' life didn't get much easier. I think 2 days later, Cortland Sutton went down and had to get an MRI on his shoulder. Luckily, that wasn't as bad. But Cortland Sutton also has an AC joint sprain, which is bad because it could linger. That kind of injury just lingers throughout the year. So he's likely to miss week 1 if he plays. It's just it's a high risk,
Yes, indeed. The other thing to consider, too, is their other pass rusher, Bradley Chubb, is coming off of a season-ending injury last year, and he's expected to be on a pitch count coming into this game. Or not this game, coming into this season. So he's not going to be able to replace Miller adequately, at least not right away. So the Broncos really are hurting right now.
Yeah, they're in trouble. I think for week 1, the pass rush is going to be okay, and the one thing I'm banking on is Jarrell Casey, because they traded for Jarrell Casey for nothing, and that kind of put a chip on his shoulder, and they get to play the Titans week 1. So I feel like I love when a player plays pissed off against his old team, so that's what I'm looking for. I think Casey could step up, but the rest of their defense is it's not looking so hot.
Another bit of Broncos news, they just extended Brandon McManus, their kicker, to a 4-year, $17.2 million deal.
For them.
Yeah, let me see. 9.5 fully guaranteed. Hey, good for him. I guess you have to sign kickers like that, but you know how I feel about that. I wouldn't. I would hope that he's cuttable after year 2.
Yeah, because he could fall off a cliff like that.
And then one last thing, the Seattle Seahawks special teams coordinator Brian Schneider left the team for personal reasons. I don't really know if that's something we even need to talk about. It was just on NFL.com. It's a slow day.
Interesting.
All right, we ready to move into the rest of the week 1 games?
Sure.
All right, we already covered the Chiefs defending their title with a win over the Texans. Let's move into the 1 o'clock games. Seattle Seahawks at the Atlanta Falcons. Falcons are giving 2.5 points to the Seahawks at home.
I don't get it with the Falcons, love, man. And the Seahawks are usually always favored in the right direction, but I'm picking the Seahawks to cover, and I likely would have picked the Seahawks to cover by a touchdown. It's really close for me. What do you have?
Well, let me kind of come to the defense of the Falcons here. The last 2 years, the Falcons' defense has been decimated by injuries both years, and last year they finished the season, I believe, 6-2. And they had some big wins, including a win over the Saints. So that's kind of where the rationale, I would assume, is coming from. That being said, we have to consider that for most of these games, there aren't going to be fans in attendance, and if there are, there's not going to be much. What did you think about that, by the way? There were what was it? I forget exactly how many fans were in attendance at the game last night, but I still felt like I heard them.
I think there was 17,000 of the 44 possible that could have been there. 44,000. I feel like it's unfair. I feel like every stadium should follow a uniform policy that the NFL provides. Like, oh yeah, you can only have 5% capacity. But the problem with that is that every state's got its own governor and stuff that's controlling that. So really, I feel like there should be no fans at any stadium this year to make it fair. But
That's just never going to
I get
happen. Owners
it's
just
never going to happen.
Yeah, the owners are just never going to turn down revenue.
Yeah, so there's going to be a few teams with unfair advantages, but hey, I mean, look at the Chargers, man. The Chargers have been playing with an unfair. This is the one time the Chargers are getting a benefit, dude. Having less fans in the stands at a Chargers game is a good thing.
It's extreme circumstances. We all got to deal with it. Just it sucks, but get over it. I guess is kind of my response to it.
Yeah.
But anyhow, I'm gonna take the Seahawks to cover as well. Even though I think the Falcons are in better shape here, the fact of the matter is the last 2 years, the first 3 weeks of the season, they've ended up putting like 5 starters on injured reserve on defense. So they're just cursed in the first few weeks. Give me the Seahawks there. Jets at Bills. Buffalo getting 6.5 at home. I like the Bills in this one. I think the Bills are set for a little regression. I don't think they're going to be quite as good as they were last year. I'm very interested to see how Josh Allen plays in year 3. Sam Darnold, on the other hand, I've not been big on the Jets, but they did play really well this back half of last season.
For me, I'm going against what I believe is best, and I'm picking the Jets plus 6.5. I'm basically going off what everyone's telling me. I don't believe in the Jets, but I keep getting told the Jets are going to be better than I think. I was like, fine, let me see it. So I'm going to pick the Jets plus 6.5, but it's going against my gut feeling that the Bills are going to be able to win this pretty easily. It's just the Jets blew everything up. They just have a complete new offensive line going into this year, like completely revamped. I don't know. I'm not a big Sam Darnold believer. I'm not a big Chris Herndon believer. I don't know. There's like this huge movement that Chris Herndon's this amazing tight end. I was like, I literally don't know where it came from. Like, people in fantasy love him. It's just like he's never not been injured. I've never seen him do anything. Like, it bothers me. I don't know why it bothers me so much, but I'm like, I've never seen this guy do anything, and he's so hyped up. I've never met someone that's done so little be hyped up so much. Then their wide receivers are just trash. Straight up. But Denzel Mims is not playing. Like, that would have been my favorite wide receiver in the game. Their wide receivers are trash. And I'm really... If listening to me talk, you probably would think I'm picking the Bills to cover.
You're trying to change your pick. It's like you're trying to convince yourself to change it.
I really don't believe in them, but everyone... Like, I've actually learned a lot about the Jets more this offseason. I've started to try and branch out and learn a little bit more about other guys' depth players, so I followed along a lot of their beat writers and stuff. And so it's not just my idiot friends that are just high on the Jets. I'm going to go against my gut feeling and pick the Jets plus 6.5, despite me trying to convince myself otherwise.
And I will take the Bills. Bears at Lions. Detroit getting 3 points at home. Matthew Stafford is back. It goes completely against my better judgment, but I'll take the Bears plus 3. I'm kind of in the same boat, but, what the hell.
Give me the Lions to cover even without Kenny Galladay. I think they could do it.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of interested with the whole Mitchell Trubisky thing. I'm by no means a believer in him, but I also don't think he's going to be the worst quarterback in the league.
Hey, he could have taken a step forward. He won the job over Nick Foles. They say he's a different kind of guy in training camp, so he might have taken that step.
Let's not forget 2 years ago, he didn't have a great year, but he had a workman-like year 2 years ago when the Bears made the playoffs. I mean, he was far from the worst quarterback in the league then.
Easily, yeah. He was serviceable.
So, I guess we'll see which quarterback we get. I'm not so doom and gloom. Plus, they had their way with Detroit last year, so I think they have a good chance to come out with a win in Week 1. Packers at Vikings. Minnesota getting 2.5 at home. This one's kind of interesting because mostly from the Packers' perspective, you think about them, they were a 13-win team last year. I said before they were the least convincing 13-win team I had ever seen. And then they have this draft, which is just an unmitigated disaster where all the players that they draft are not starters. I mean, their first two picks are like backups or third stringers. Their third pick was a guy that's basically a fullback, coming out. And, there's no reason to think that they could get better, except the players they already had on their team might get better. And I think Aaron Rodgers can play better. So maybe the Packers are going to be better, but win fewer games. Does that make any sense?
I don't know, man. I think the Packers are on a spiral downfall. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is the same player. Aaron Jones is down for regression. 15 touchdowns are likely not to happen again. They're starting Robert Tonyan as their tight end of choice over Josiah Deguara, the one that they drafted in the 5th round. That's basically. Oh no, I'm sorry, not basically fullback. You're talking about AJ Dillon.
Yeah.
They drafted AJ Dillon, the third string running back. Just like there's nothing good on this team anymore. They lost Randall Cobb. Second wide receiver is Alan Lazard, which I actually am higher on.
Well, they lost Cobb 2 years ago. He was in Dallas last year.
I'm an idiot. Yeah, dude. Who was I thinking of then?
Geronimo.
Last year?
Is Geronimo Allison still there?
Oh no, he went to the Lions and then opted out. So
yeah.
I can't remember that Randall Cobb left, but I can somehow remember Geronimo. I don't understand my brain sometimes. But regardless, there's one. Oh, they lost Brian Beluga.
Yes.
They got the Lions tackle, but like that's a big deal too. It's just like I'm doing a lot of smack talking on the Packers. I'm going to finish this by saying I'm picking the Packers plus 2.5, but I just see the Packers on this huge downfall that I could see them going like 7-9 this year, 6-10. Like I think they're overhyped. I think Aaron Rodgers is at this point in his career is overrated. But like I also hate the Vikings, so this is like both these teams are the fighting of two overrated teams. I don't like Kirk Cousins either. They lost Michael Pierce to opting out. What else? They
lost
Daniel
Kevin.
Hunter's not playing for this game.
They lost Kevin Stefanski.
They lost Kevin Stefanski, so they're under a new offensive coordinator. Like both these teams are overhyped. Like I could see the Lions coming out of this division after nobody talked about them as the division leader, which is tough. But like, I don't like either of these teams. I really think that they're like two of the most overhyped teams and overrated teams in the league. Packers plus 2.5.
The Vikings also lost 2 cornerbacks in Trey Waynes and Mackenzie Alexander in free agency to the Bengals, and they weren't great players, but they were still starters, so there's a lot of turnover on that back end.
Yeah, it's just tough. They have probably the best safety tandem in the league, at least they got going for them in Harrison Smith and, oh my gosh, I can't remember his name, Anthony Harris? Anthony Harris, does that sound correct?
All I can think about is Anthony Barr.
Yeah. They had a breakout safety last year that PFF graded as like one of the best safeties. It was the one play. I think his name is Anthony Harris.
That sounds right. I'm also gonna take the Packers plus 2.5.
Yeah, I think that's just the best way to go.
Oops. Dolphins and Patriots. Patriots are minus 6.5 at home. I like the Dolphins in this one. What about you?
I also like the Dolphins. I love Xavier Howard. When he was on the trade block like 2 years ago, I really wanted the Steelers to go after him because I loved him. And then they got I literally always want to call him Felix Jones, and that's the running back. What do you know who I'm it's the cornerback they got from the Cowboys. What is his name?
Who?
The cornerback they got from the Cowboys. They didn't trade for him. He just left him for agency.
Oh, I'm not sure.
Safety for the two. I call him Felix Jones all the time, and his name is not Felix Jones. I think of the running back from the Cowboys, but that's not who I'm...
Rashad Jones? Rashad Jones? Is that who you're talking about?
From the Cowboys. Whatever. It's just I think the Dolphins are not the team as they were last year, and I think that the Patriots are close to the team that they were last year. And it's just that I think it's going to be much closer than think. I think that I'm also not big on. I'm not a big fan of Cam Newton. Hit that at all. It's it's Byron Jones. Byron Jones, not Felix.
Oh.
Byron. There we go. I literally always call Felix. He's from the Cowboys. Byron Jones is also a good quarterback, so they have really a good starting two cornerbacks. I am worried about their safeties, but other than that, I think that they could keep it within 6.5 points. So I'm picking the Dolphins plus 6.5.
Yeah, the Patriots have been decimated by opt-outs. The one thing you could argue with them is that the Dolphins have not seen a Cam Newton offense with Bill Belichick, for whatever that's worth. So, take that for what you will. That being said, I still think the Patriots are a 7-win team. I don't think the Dolphins are that good, but let's not forget, in this exact situation last year, the Patriots needed to win to get a first-round bye, and the Dolphins beat them with Ryan Fitzpatrick, and Fitzpatrick is back. I think the Dolphins will make it close, but I think the Patriots will probably win. Probably. You never know what you'll get with Fitzpatrick, because 2 years ago against the Saints, he threw for 450 yards and 4 touchdowns, so you never really know. Eagles at...
And I like Patrick.
Yeah, he's solid. I like him too. I believe we're into the 4 o'clock games now, are we? Or did I? No, we're not. Wow, I forgot. There's no bye weeks. There's a lot of 1 o'clock games. Eagles at football team, the Washington football team, that is. Washington has given away 5.5 at home. I originally had Washington in this one, but I don't know. This is going to be a low-scoring game. I'll take the Eagles to cover.
Like last year. What I'm going with is my friend Mitchell telling me the Washington football team always plays the Eagles close, no matter what, no matter how bad the Washington football team is and no matter how good the Eagles are. So I'm picking Washington plus 5.5, just like I did week 1 last year when Washington was trashed.
Las Vegas Raiders, newly minted at the Carolina Panthers, and Teddy Bridgewater. The Bridgewater-led Panthers are 3-point underdogs at home.
I'm picking the Raiders to cover. The Carolina Panthers might be the worst team in football this year. We're going to have to see.
Me too. I like what they're trying to build with Teddy Bridgewater and Christian McCaffrey, but I think that the Panthers are a 4-win team, and for them to get to 4 wins, they may have to win this one, but I have a hard time seeing it. The continuity with Derek Carr and the Raiders, even though he's not a great quarterback, is a lot more important than where Bridgewater's coming from with a new coach and a new system they're building up.
Yeah, they're just not ready yet. They're a rebuilding team, and they're not bad when they should be good. They're bad when they should be bad.
AFC South matchup, Colts at Jaguars. Jaguars are 8-point underdogs at home. I originally had Jaguars plus 8, and then I actually thought about it a little bit, and I'm going to take the Colts to cover.
I was surprised by that because the Jaguars are fighting with the Panthers for that worst team in football spot at the moment. I'm going to pick the Colts to cover.
Yeah, there's just not a lot left on that Jaguars team. I mean, that team that was in the AFC Championship game less than 3 years ago has been completely dismantled.
Yeah, Telvin Smith's arrested. Yannick Ngakoue is over in Minnesota. Elias Campbell's with the Ravens. The only one still there is Miles Jack.
Is AJ Boye still there?
Boye is with the Broncos.
Jalen Ramsey traded. Malik Jackson bought out. Who the hell knows what happened to Marcel Darius?
I don't know. I think he might still be there, honestly.
I'm pretty sure he's not, although I'm going to check. Marcel Darius. That's a guy that never panned out quite like I thought he would. Man, he's only 30? He's a free agent. Wow. He was a 2-time Pro Bowler. When did he last play? He played for the Jaguars last year.
That's why I thought he was still with them.
He might have opted out. I'm not sure about that. So no one would sign him if there's no point. Anyways, Browns and Ravens, 7.5 points the Ravens are getting at home. This is very interesting. Last year, remember, the Browns went in, hung 40 on the Ravens at home, and absolutely blew them out. I don't think that's going to happen now. The Ravens have dominated the last 2 years on opening day. Remember, they absolutely destroyed the Dolphins, and then the year before that, they beat the Bills 47-3 in the Week 1 game. I don't know. This game is going to go a long way to I think determining what the Browns are going to be this year. If they play this one close, I think that would bode really well for them. But if they get blown out, I think they could start to tailspin right away.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the Ravens to cover. The Browns, it's going to be interesting to see. We're gonna have to. You know what I'm more looking for? I'm looking to see how Lamar Jackson plays, if he can keep running and stuff. The whole year, that's all I'm going to be watching the Ravens. As soon as the Ravens stop being able to run, is when the Ravens are going to collapse. And I don't know if that's ever going to happen. So I don't know if the Ravens will ever collapse. But that's what they rely on. They need the running game from Lamar Jackson and Mark Ingram and J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards. All those guys, they need that to function as a team.
By all accounts, it doesn't work in the playoffs.
No, we have seen it not work twice now.
I also have the Ravens covering. Now into the 4 o'clock games. Don't you just love how the NFL has so many 1 o'clock games and just 3 games at 4 o'clock?
Yeah, it's fun, man.
Chargers at Bengals is one of them, so that's really not one that anyone wants to see. Bengals are giving away 3 at home. I got a funny feeling about this one. I have a feeling that things are kind of put in place for Joe Burrow to succeed, but I hate that offensive line, so give me the Chargers to cover.
I, too, will pick the Chargers to cover with Geno Atkins likely not playing, even though Mike Pouncey isn't playing either. I like the Chargers a little bit better. I don't like the rookie starting against a pretty solid defense all in all. I mean, you got Casey Hayward and you have
even without Derwin James, that's a good secondary.
Yeah, Casey Hayward, Chris Harris, pretty good guys. Melvin Ingram I like, Joey Bosa I like. I think it's just tough for Joe Burrow to play with such a bad offensive line in front of him.
I will say, Tyler Boyd is very, very comparable to what Justin Jefferson was like in the slot. So that's something to look out for. Look for a lot of Tyler Boyd.
Okay.
Buccaneers at Saints is probably the headline game of the day on Sunday. Saints are getting 3.5 at home. I still don't buy into the Buccaneers hype. I think the Saints win by 2 touchdowns.
I'm going to pick the Saints to cover. I'm unsure how this game is going to unravel. I don't believe in the Bucs either, but I feel like I could be proven wrong here. But I'm going to pick Saints cover.
Cardinals at 49ers. The 49ers are getting 7 at home. This one's kind of deceptive. This is the one that I don't feel comfortable with. I took the 49ers, but Kyler Murray in his second year with DeAndre Hopkins could be a very dangerous combo. And I'm nervous. If one were to pick Cardinals plus the points, I wouldn't argue with you.
I will be doing that too. I'm going to pick the Cards plus 7. Kyler Murray is going to be the MVP this year.
Of the league. Of the league.
He's posed for it.
Hey.
MVP for the league.
He's the man.
Ready.
He's
a second-year quarterback. That's typically what it takes the past 2 years.
Sunday Night Football, Cowboys at Rams. Rams giving 3 at home. You know, I don't know. I wanted to go with the Rams, but I do think the Cowboys have more continuity, and I like that.
I am going to pick the Cowboys to cover. Their offense just, at the moment, looks pretty unstoppable. So it's going to be tough to keep up with them.
I think they're overrated, but I'm not convinced that the Rams are as good as a team as they had been over the past few years. I think they're trying to start to retool now. I don't think they're quite as good. So I'll also take the Cowboys to cover. Late Monday night game, Titans at Broncos. Denver plus 2 at home. I'm kind of surprised that line hasn't changed more considering the injuries to Courtland Sutton and Von Miller. Give me the Titans easily. That was the hottest team in the NFL at the end of the year.
Yeah, and the Titans also added Jadeveon Clowney at the buzzer, like right before this week. So
Meh.
it's tough. Even if you don't like Jadeveon Clowney, he is likely a better pass rusher than whoever they were going to start next to Harold Landry. So
okay.
I will also. What?
Said okay, fine, you're right.
Yeah. So Titans cover and rest in peace Von Miller. It's tough, man. It's gonna be tough for the Broncos.
All right, bold predictions and X factors for this game: Steelers and Giants. I'll go first. I'm going with Villanueva on offense for the X factor. Protecting Ben Roethlisberger's blind side in his first game back is extremely important, and if he's in a decline, this is a very bad time for it. He needs to play well, even though his competition might not be all that good on Monday night. And on defense, I'm going with Devin Bush. I've made it no secret that I've really liked him ever since he came out of college. I thought he had a solid rookie year, but I think this upcoming year is when we could see him really become a star. And on a defense, it was already as great as it was last year. Having a budding star in the middle of that defense is going to make it that much better, so I'm really excited to see that. My bold predictions: I have Ben Roethlisberger uncorking a 40-yard deep pass on the first play of the game that gets completed. For for giggles, just for giggles' sake, I have Zach Banner catching a touchdown and the Steelers sacking Daniel Jones 9 different times. What are your bold predictions and X factors?
So I'll start with my X factors, and similar to you, I was worried about protecting Ben. So my offensive X factor is going to be Steven Wisniewski. Coming in and immediately starting as a new guy is going to be tough for him. I'm hoping for the best because the Giants' defensive line isn't that great. They got Leonard Williams, but
Dexter Williams is okay too, but he's not really a pass rusher.
Yeah, so it's just I think that it's important Wisniewski keeps Ben protected. And on defense, I have Terrell Edmonds, as I view him as the only weak spot, quote unquote, on the defense because he's only okay. So I'm going to have him as the X factor. And my bold predictions are that Terrell Edmonds, pick 6, is the only touchdown in this game. Benny Snell gets a 25 or over yard run. That Daniel Jones has 5 turnovers in this game because he's not very good at that. Yeah.
All right. Final score? What do you think about this game?
I think that the offense is going to come out slow like they usually do, and it's not going to work. But I think that because the defense is so good and that that's going to be overwhelming for the Giants, the Steelers are going to be able to win 16-3, getting 3 field goals in the game. And I went with my bold prediction that the only touchdown is going to come from the defense. So I have the Steelers winning 16-3 and covering the 6-point spread. What do you got for this game?
I just think you look up and down the lineup. I think the Steelers have the more talented team. I think the continuity factor cannot be underestimated in the first week of games in the NFL season. And I think Ben Roethlisberger's return will be huge, not just for the offense, but because the defense won't have to carry such a big load this year. I think that the Steelers' offense will, as you said, be maybe a little rusty trying to find its groove. I still think they'll be able to put up a decent amount of points, and on defense, I think they'll be able to smother Daniel Jones and the Giants. I have the Steelers winning 24-10 and starting out 1-0, covering that 6-point spread. My last thing I wanted to get to, Austin, is we are now at the conclusion of this podcast. It's time for our official Steelers season predictions. So, as far as the overall record, where do you have the Steelers finishing this year, and how do you have their season playing out?
I have them finishing 10-6, with them losing 1 game to the Ravens and 1 game to the Browns, part of those 6 losses. I feel like it's just how it's going to work out. I think that they're a pretty good team. I think that overall, Ben is going to find his rhythm. The defense is going to continue playing as good as they were. And barring injuries, the Steelers should be locked to get a playoff spot. The Steelers, if with the current playoff rules, the Steelers wouldn't have missed the playoffs since, I forget the actual number, but, they wouldn't have missed it in 2013 when they did. They wouldn't have missed it last year because they would have been the 17th. It's almost, if the Steelers are just able to go at a, go 500, go 8-8, they're going to make the playoffs. And if you don't think this team is better than the 8-8 team that we had last year, I don't know what to tell you. The Steelers are only better than they were last year and should be much better. So I see them as a 10-6 team. How about you?
I have gone back and forth between 9-7 and 10-6 so much over the past few months. I'm settling on 10-6 because I look around the rest of the AFC and I wonder what's the third best team in the AFC besides Baltimore and Kansas City. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily Houston. I mean, we just saw Houston. I don't think they're that great of a team. The Browns have talent, but they suck. They still somehow suck. The Steelers, maybe. They have their question marks. I mean, who's the third best team in the AFC?
According to Vegas, it's Titans.
I could see that, but there's questions there too. Ryan Tannehill has had 1.5 good years as an NFL quarterback.
Yeah, it's a lot to bet on, man. It's a lot to bet on.
So, I have the Steelers at 10-6, and I think I'm going to have them winning one playoff game.
All right, that's fair.
Where do you have their playoff going? I forgot if you said anything about that.
I did not, because I did not think about it, but I will say that they make it past wild card weekend. And I want to say they'll go past the divisional round. The defense is pretty smothering. I'm going to say they go past the divisional round and lose in the conference championships.
How many turnovers do you think they finish with? Because 25 is that magic number.
I think that they're going to finish with 30, 34, 33.
Wow.
33 seems like a good number.
That would be awesome if they could manage to do that again.
Yeah, they had 35 last year, so I'm hoping Joe Hayden's gonna not drop as many as he did, which he said he worked on, and that they're gonna be as high up there as they were. And starting with Daniel Jones is a good way to get that number up.
I'm gonna go with 25 right on the dot. I just feel like they were really lucky the last year. They were really good, but also really lucky. I feel like they're not going to be nearly as lucky this year.
That's fair.
So, all right. NFL Week 1 slate of games, and the Steelers at Giants is right around the corner. Thank you, as always, for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Feel free to email us if you have questions about the show, and check out our various social media platforms listed in the description below. Austin, have a terrific night. Thanks for joining me, as you always do. And ladies and gentlemen listening, have a terrific night and enjoy the Week 1 slate of NFL games. Thank you.
Bye.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.